Good evening and good morning to everyone and our viewers. I'm Brian Nevote from Orthman Africa, Territory Manager, and we would just firstly like to thank everyone for joining us in our third episode. We would like to welcome a few guys that will be joining us this evening, and before I get started, I'd like them to introduce themselves.
Scoot over a little.
Yeah.
Oh, we're good.
Mike, you can.
How's everybody today in South Africa? This is Mike Peterson and my guest, Pat McNaught. Pat is a grower and also a employee of Orthman Manufacturing, but Pat is our grower for the Orthman Research Facility. It's on his family farm that we're doing this job, and Pat is definitely eager to see how this all turns out and how we're looking at research that will be effective not only for folks in this part of the United States, but what you guys are anticipating for your 2020, 2021 crop over in South Africa. Pat?
How's everybody doing today? As Mike said, I'm a territory manager for Orthman, but also do a little farming on the side, and currently I'm operating the Orthman Research Farm. So here to answer some questions about strip tillage and its practice. I've been involved with it probably for the last 15 years or so, predominantly with the Orthman machine. So I've been across about 5 states and countless different soil conditions and climates. So hopefully I have something to add to the conversation.
You bet.
Yeah.
Brian, what we're looking at right now here in the United States, especially at the McNaught farm, our studies are bringing us to a point where our corn is right at the stage where it's setting the girth or the number of rows around the cob in the plant itself via its DNA. And we are right at that stage where it's premium to make sure that we've got our fertility all on board, so to speak, if you think about it in what they call in the medical term. And then also what we're seeing in our plant tissue analysis from how our pre-plant fertilizer with the strip till rig and also then with the planter really got engaged here in the last 8 to 9 days. Pat and I were just looking at that, and we want to be able to express to you over in South Africa that as you pre-plant your fertilizer with your strip till rig, it becomes very important that you don't do this way far in advance of when that plant is really going to get started, but also to gauge it so you know when the plant will take it up and become totally effective to set the stage for the best production that you can get. We have found that we put our products in the ground approximately 10 days to 15 days prior to the planting. And as I said, that was done the end of April. And we are now at 40 days after emergence, and everything that shows up in the soil and tissue analysis is saying it's right there ready to go, and that the plant is actually now taking it up just like a young person is taking in nutrition. It is gobbling it, and it's really eating it fast. But that's important to know that we set the stage properly. And Pat, you might want to express what we did prior to planting and then what we did at planting, just to give them a good idea.
So our strip till application, it was a combination of of a variety of products, predominantly phosphorus, potassium, a little bit of nitrogen, and then also some micronutrients. And then with the starter pass in furrow at a rate of 5 gallons an acre, predominantly again a phosphorus product, a little bit of nitrogen, and in certain starter varieties a little bit of potassium. But also then we added in a carbon source, some zinc, plant growth regulator, and some boron. And we did several different trials with different mixes of those particular products, and we're just about ready to take our second set of data sets next week to see if we see the same differences we saw early on between all those products. So predominantly we're studying the starter products. The strip till product was consistent across the entire farm at a rate of 47 gallon an acre.
So you can see, Brian, our growers here in the United States, but also for your listeners and your growers over in South Africa, we're really looking at the double package, the package with the strip till and the package with the planter, and how that's affecting the plant as it gets to this point that's very critical for development of the ear in corn. So have you received any questions coming online?
Yeah, not at the moment, Mike, but I'm sure there will be some guys that will ask some questions shortly. I know it is harvesting season now, so I think a lot of the guys are still, harvesting at the moment. But I think, maybe a question to Pat is, I don't know your guys' background, but have you? Okay, you've done strip till, your family and everyone's done strip till for the last 10 years. But prior to that, what was your guys' how can I say, working practices before you moved over to strip till, and why did you move over to strip till? I think some of the guys in South Africa would like to hear this type of information.
Well, predominantly prior to strip till, it was all conventional till, and the reasons for switching to strip till were time, number one, because we can apply fertility, we can prep for planting, and we can deal with compaction all in one pass. Basically, we condensed 3 passes that we were making before into one, which saves us much time, and that's critical. And time is money, fuel, hours on tractors. Anytime we can keep the tractor out of the field is a good thing for the pocketbook. And then probably secondly, but just as important, was accuracy of fertility placement and correct fertility placement prior to planting. So those are predominantly the 2 biggest reasons to switch.
Did you do broadcasting before, Matt, or did you not do any fertilizer?
So predominantly before that, we were using a liquid fertilizer, which still are to some extent, and some dry. But liquid fertilizer, both with the planter, a weed and feed pass with a sprayer right after planting, and then a third pass of side dress. But we weren't doing much prior, if any, prior to planting. We still do the weed and feed pass, and we still do the side dress pass. We're just spreading it out in hopes that we can use a little less, simply because we're more timely with the applications.
Sure, yeah. And you've obviously seen over the past years, and a difference in your yields as well, correct?
I didn't catch that. Sorry.
You've seen your differences in yields, your bushels. You've increased your bushels per acre. Am I correct?
I guess the best way I can describe it, and I'll be conservative here, I do believe that there's been an increase in yields. Probably the most dramatic effect is it's taken our poorer ground or our less productive ground and evened it up with our higher quality ground. So on those acres, absolutely, there was in fact, a pretty drastic yield increase. On the good ground, or what we consider the best ground, probably not a massive yield increase, somewhere in the neighborhood of, so far, 5 to 10%. But if you take that 5 to 10% plus all the time we're saving and the trips across the field we're saving, it's had a pretty substantial impact on the bottom line.
Sure. No, thanks, Pat. I'm sure some of the viewers, would appreciate that information. And if there's any information or questions that you guys want to ask, please feel free. As julle navrae het, asseblief stuur 'n kommentaar. Ek is maar hierso om vir hulle aan te gee. So asseblief, as daar enigiets is, vra my en hoop ons kan vir julle terug antwoord. Mike, I don't know if there's anything else that you have on that, or Pat, if you have anything else to share. If not, maybe we can just touch a bit of base on, certain weeds and how do we. I know we did discuss a little bit about it and how do we, or if you guys have any, farming practices, the ideal farming practice for farmers here in Africa. I do see there has been one comment coming through. Okay, so the customers asked here, Mike, from Dries de Blanche, when is the ideal time to use a concave basket or to use a flat the flat basket?
What we have found with the soil conditions that we have here in the United States, we believe that more often than not, using the flat basket will be the best, because we don't want to have a small little V or concave area on the edge of either side of the strip. So in that zone that is probably about 18 centimeters wide up to 20 centimeters wide, we have a flat area that we want to be able to set the planter on. And if it has a V on either side and you'd get a heavy rainstorm, it causes an area for the water to run and take erosion and move soil away from your strip area. And then when it comes time to plant, it can be a big trouble. So the strip till system has really been designed, especially from Orthman, Brian, and all of your growers over in South Africa. We want to put it so that we've got a very flat area for the planter to ride, so we have a very smooth ride, and that it doesn't cause the planter to shift from left or right and then start to move the entire machine, whether it's 8 rows, 12 rows, 16 rows of your planter from one side to the other, and then miss where we placed the fertilizer, which was right in the middle of it with the strip till. We want to avoid that. Now, I know that there's been talk here in the United States, well, I need a berm. They need somewhat of a hill from where we strip tilled, and they're saying this because it'll help shed water. Not true. More often than not, what happens, folks, is that it causes that water then to run off and run to those edges. They're very loose, and then it has 2 stripes that'll take water and erase it and move it away from, and now you've got severe erosion problems. Or because you guys are sandy soils and they're dry. And if that creates a dome where wind erosion now wants to swipe that off, and now it creates, your sand is moving around, and it's just like a buzz saw, and it wants to cut off your infantile plants, and now you got another problem. You killed your crop because sand is moving around. Have it flat, and more often than not, and I'm talking about 90% more often, you're going to keep that from happening because the wind doesn't have a chance to always catch an edge and move soil away. That is something I learned a long time ago when I used to work for the United States Department of Agriculture. You get a ridge like that, and it wants to blow, and it wants to move sand, and that's bad news. Let's avoid that.
That's something that I've just learned now, Mike. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
I hope that gives an answer to Dries de Blanche and Mike. I think just before we move over to the whole weed control and everything, I think there was one question a customer asked me. Very sandy soils. I know we you and I have just talked about it. I'm sure you've seen it. You can water table, depending on the water table and everything as well. The guys rip to about 1 meter deep, depending on what season, how much water is. That's just obviously just to get the roots down. So the question here is, obviously we've had a very good rainy season this past year. The question that he asked is, he at the moment working at a 450. Is that ideal? Is that really the right place to work the machine at? Or rather sticking it up to leaving it here by 250, 300. Your suggestion on that, Mike?
Well, I know that Brian, your folks that are asking those kinds of questions are wanting to do the deep tillage to help fracture the soil so that the root system for corn or sunflowers or whatever it is can get down to your perched water table as quick as possible. That makes sense, but when you're using a strip till rig and trying to make it a subsoiler, we're kind of defeating what the tool is really designed for. And we want the tool to really work for you, and we want it to do the right job and we don't want to tear the tool apart. The dynamics of placing something down around 400 millimeters, close to 500 millimeters, requires a lot of horsepower, and it requires a toolbar that is built for that, those kinds of forces and dynamics. As you well know, our 6DDT tool is really designed better to make that happen. And I would suggest to your growers that would be the machine that they would use if they want to go really deep. If they're looking at in the upper 350 millimeters, our tool does the job, and it does it remarkably well. In fact, I'm incredibly proud to say that our tool probably does better than most every other tool that we know that's out on the American market and many other places around the world. So looking at the purpose of why you want to strip till that deep really requires a specific shank and a point and a toolbar that will do it more properly.
Mike, we've got another question. I think, Pat, maybe you have something here. I've got a customer here that says, weeds are a big challenge. If you only spray, strip, and plant, especially in grasses. What have you guys seen, and what have you guys done, with this this type of practices.
Well, are they talking about the grasses that are summer annuals, your summer annual versus a winter annual? Maybe Vihan could address that and let us know, because the herbicide selection will be somewhat different than if you were looking at certain grasses that grow in the wintertime versus those that grow in the summertime. What's his second question? Will you rather do a seedbed cultivation before strip till and a planter, or will you go for cultivation between the rows? Answer to that, again, is what you have for herbicide selection, and I don't know what all of those choices are in South Africa. If you, Brian, can find that out, that would be great, and then we can address that on a future conference call. But I know that cultivation between the rows during the crop growth is a good way to make it happen. And again, Orthman has the tools to make that occur. But it really depends upon your weed and your herbicide selection of whether or not you want to do. If you want to help save moisture to the extent that it's very, very vital, then herbicide can gain an advantage over the mechanical when you have to. I see he says those are summer annuals. The pre-emergent herbicides that are for grasses in a corn plant or a corn crop, there's good selections. Most of those are they have a certain duration. By that I mean you apply them prior to planting or right before it emerges, and they can give you anywhere from 40 to 90 days of pretty clean field. It depends upon what your maximum rate is, but I would sure think that there are compounds that you guys have got in South Africa that would meet that. I know that there's a cost value there, and one has to look at the cost versus mechanical tillage.
Correct, yeah. No, Mike, I think that's very important information that you've shared here with us. I think, I'm sure, and hopefully we've touched the basis of, especially on how to do weed control and everything like that. So, but, if there's anyone that's willing to know a little bit more about it, hopefully, they're more than welcome to send us a message via Facebook or YouTube, and Mike or myself will get back to you.
Sure.
I think I would also like him to go to your website, Mike. Maybe you can just give me a bit more information about your website, while we at it talking about this.
Most definitely. For those of you in South Africa, it is www.precisiontillage, all one word, .com. We also have the Orthman.com website that we can introduce those kinds of topics. But the Precision Tillage website that I'm very much a part of, we can discuss those kinds of issues right there. And I write, as you well know, Brian, a weekly blog that is agronomic based to help people not only here in the United States, but we help the growers over there in South Africa about not only the tillage and what goes on with soil quality and soil health, but also the concept of fertilizer and fertilizer health, and that we're looking for those kinds of things to help inform growers that you have a lot of good options, and what we're trying to do is to help maximize good production and give you guys better analysis about what we see here and how that can be applicable to what you're doing. So I say Vihan has added a little bit more, saying he's starting to experience some of the resistance to glyphosate, and that's why they're looking back to cultivation. True enough, it's doing the same thing here in the United States. There are weeds that are having resistance to glyphosate where it can be used. One of the things that we have found too, ladies and gentlemen, over in South Africa, is using the best quality glyphosate products that you can get. Secondly, it's very important to check the pH of your water that you're mixing your glyphosate into for the spray operation. And the reason I bring that up is that when you look on the label for your use of glyphosate, it normally will tell you that the pH of that water that you are wanting to use should be 5.5. If it is not, let's say your water that you're adding from your well or wherever you're getting it, that's clean water, and you're putting it in the tank and the pH is 7.5, the effectiveness of your glyphosate is probably cut in half, 50%. So then you go out there and you spray, and you're not getting the dose that really will make the difference to kill weeds. That's why we're seeing some of these resistant weeds that are coming about. So before you get ready to mix your glyphosate into the spray water, make certain that the pH is at 5.5. Now that can be done by using ammonium sulfate, and on for so many liters of water, you add so many pounds of that particular, or grams of that particular product. And then you check it again to make sure you get your pH down there. There are other products that are out on the American market that will do similar things that will help lower pH. You want to make sure that you're getting it right. Chemistry is very important, and as I'm sure everybody over in South Africa realizes that. I'm not telling them anything new, but make sure it's done right. Whether or not it's a commercial applicator or you get your pH right, and you will see better results. And that's pretty doggone important these days, and when you spend the amount of money that you have to for your herbicide.
Yeah, Mike, something that just come through to my mind right now. I know there's been a discussion about some guys trying to put lime down with a strip tool, even, I'm not saying just with a strip tool, but putting lime in bands, like with a ripper. I don't know. What do you see on that, Mike?
Well, I know that your growers over in South Africa have some lower pH issues in your soils, and also you're trying to help affect the calcium and magnesium issue. It works, and I know that I've seen the results from what you've shown me, Brian, and what Graham has shown me, and also some other folks prior to you. But using it in the zone of where you strip has some good effects. Over here in the United States, where we have done it using pelletized lime instead of ag lime, we've had some very good results in soils that have very low pHs, 4.5 to 5. And in that zone, we can help take care of the rooting so that the roots do a good job, so that it also brings the pH up closer to neutral, and also to set the stage for your nutrients to be more available in that right pH level. And make sure that your soil sampling prior to it, so you know how much to use. I know that sounds pretty silly, but I'm not telling you anything new, but that will help gauge how much you need to have. We're finding that ag lime needs to be ag lime needs to be in the soil a minimum of 120 days before it becomes effective. If you're trying to put lime in with the strip till operation and expect it to do its job in the year that you're growing the crop, look out. That could be a problem. We want to make sure that when you use lime, especially in the ag lime form, which is a very, very powdery form, get it in the soil 120 days prior to when it really is necessary for the crop to find the positive effects.
Mike, I don't know if you both, between you and Pat, so I don't know if you guys have seen, especially when a strip till breaks cloth. I had a customer today that I spoke to today. They spoke about putting more pressure down on the basket. So now what they're wanting to do is they want to put a hydraulic cylinder, more like a pneumatic downforce type of thing on the basket on the back. Have you guys seen that in the US? Are guys doing that, or what is your suggestion on doing it? Would you do it or would you not do it?
When it comes to breaking up clods, really the basket doesn't really play a role. It's merely a leveling tool to create for a smooth seedbed for the planter to ride on. If we're not breaking up clods, it's generally because of the wavy coulters or the closing coulters being A, not deep enough, or B, not close enough together. That's generally the reason the clods aren't breaking up. Some of it could be predicated on soil moisture too, or lack thereof. Yeah. If the ground is really hard and dry, it really isn't going to matter what you're going to do. And the basket, putting more down pressure on the basket is not going to solve that problem. That's generally an issue created by the closing coulters that can be fixed with the closing coulters by going deeper and or narrower.
Okay. Mike, I see Vian asked a question about liquid lime.
Well, for Vihan and then others that are asking or thinking about that same question, we have here in the United States used some liquid lime. The cost effectiveness for some growers makes a difference. They can do it. But if your budget for your fertilizer program and your seed program and all your tillage is somewhat limited or is extremely limited, liquid lime cost-wise will eat your pocketbook like a moth does to wool. It will really cause a negative effect. But if you've got a crop that is fairly high in its cash value, liquid lime will give you immediate benefits, and it's something to be thought of as part of your program, and I would suggest it, but otherwise, no.
What, Mike, I know you're discussing about that now, but let's say, for instance, if I'm correctly speaking, Vian has a XD combo. So, he's planting it at the same time as he's stripping. Would you put that liquid lime down at the same time of planting, or would you do it at a separate time of the year?
Agronomically, it'd probably be smarter to do it separately than compared to if you were using it in a combo package. I would think that you want the liquid lime to start going into solution so that it can be effective when it is necessary for the plant to start uptaking nutrients. If I don't know if you are or not, Vihan, if you're looking at some salt issues, then liquid lime will give you immediate effect and help control that issue. Excuse me.
Hope the corona hasn't got you, Mike.
Yeah, right. No, it's a dry throat. Sorry. From all the dust that was yesterday, I inhaled a lot of dust. It was, when you've got 80 km/h winds, it's bound to, you're going to suck in dust. Sorry about that, folks. I
Need water, Mike?
I'm good. So, I want to back up a second, Brian, and talk briefly of what we have seen here with our strip till studies, because we've been looking at not only just here in Nebraska, but in other states. Our strip till root system is probably anywhere from 15 to 25 centimeters deeper than we are in the no-till systems and also the conventional till systems. It has advanced that much further, and we're creating an environment for this plant to really take off. And we're going to know a little bit more here in the very near future. We put in what we call a moisture capacitance probe that's going to follow that season long. But I was probing this morning here before we got ready to come online, and our root systems, as I could find today, we were at 55 centimeters deep. We're doing really well. And I went into a no-till soil field that was right close, and they were only between 30 and 40 centimeters deep. That's significant. That means we've got a larger root system, but also a chance to be able to get moisture deeper later in the season. It's very important. That's part of what we really know strip till does for a grower. And I'm sure for you guys that are looking for that shallow water table, that's part of the reason why you want to get your root systems down there. Get access to that water so that plant can grow and really yield.
Yeah, Mike, I think, we're coming around here to the end now. And I think next week, I know we discussed a bit of it, I think last week about what type of hybrids, to plant and, population, I guess, using strip till. So I think, we're coming really to the end now of this. So I want to keep this short and hopefully not next week, but the week thereafter, is just to have a quick discussion about, the types of hybrids and populations in, using strip till.
Sure, I'd love to address that. And that can be a point of discussion that we can help give some suggestion and some ideas about what we're seeing here in the States and how that can be applicable to you guys in South Africa. Fantastic.
Yeah, so, just before we go, I just lastly want to say thank you to ProAgri. They've done a great job on promoting and advertising the strip till conference here in Africa and in South Africa. So, yeah, lastly, I just want to say thanks to ProAgri and Mike, we will definitely see you guys again, next season in the next episode. And Pat, thank you for joining us this evening. I know it was a very short call, but I appreciate the information that you shared with our viewers here in Africa.
You bet. We'll look forward to week after next to be back in touch with all of you and address some of those questions about hybrids and root types. I think that will be informative to your growers.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you.